Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony Podcast. Let's go and get started with Week 39's Word Nerd Wednesday. I've really enjoyed our long comfort read on Third Age Thursdays as we celebrate Bilbo and Frodo's birthdays at a long-expected party. And this has given me all sorts of new words to look at on Word Nerd Wednesdays this series. From Baggins to Gamgee, nasturtiums to gross, we've talked a lot about words from this chapter, but not 111 words, or 11-1, as the case may be. Now, 11-1 seems to our modern ears a silly number, almost a made-up one, like umpteen or gazillion. But there is a history here, and not surprisingly, Tolkien knew precisely what he was doing. Or as the authors of The Ring of Words put it, as always with Tolkien, the roots go deeper and are planted in the reality of the culture of the ancient world. You see, it turns out that English, like a lot of Germanic languages, actually retains traces of a base 12 numbering system. Now, as the online etymology dictionary, and if you haven't have that site bookmarked yet, you really should, as that says, the most obvious instance is 11 and 12, which really ought to be the first two numbers of the teens series. You know, I always thought there was something odd about those two numbers. They don't fit like 21, 22, 31, 32, but they also don't work like the rest of the teens. Now, we could just write them off as preteen numbers, thus explaining their awkwardness, but that's just a bad joke from a dad of two preteens. Anyway, back to word nerdery. The Old English forms of 11 and 12 are, and I'm sure I'm not going to pronounce these correctly. I've got a lot of Old English today, so please bear with me. They are Eleofan and Tweleofan, meaning leave one and leave two. Now, that is one more than 10 and two more than 10. That leave, by the way, is also interesting. It's total sidebar, but Viking survivors who escaped an Anglo-Saxon victory were said to be Dorotha Laf, the leavings of spears, the remainders. And Hamora Laf, the leavings of hammers, was an Old English kenning for swords. Now, that Laf, or lev, is the 11 and 11 bits of 11 and 12, right there, the leavings. Now, sticking with the online etymology dictionary, Old English also had hund and leofantig for 110 and hund twelftig for 120, while 100 was hunteantig. You can almost hear the 100 from there. Now, that tig ending on each of those is where we get the T, as in 20, 30, 40, and so on. Now, it ran through 12 cycles, not 10, and it would have given us 11D for 110 and 12T for 120, but it began to be obscured even as far back as the Anglo-Saxon period. Now, we learned that Old Norse hundrað was not 100, but 120, and thusend was not 1,000, but 1,200. Tvauhundrað was 240, not 200. Old Germanic legal texts distinguished between a common hundred, 100, and a great hundred of 120. Now, that great hundred was split into two halves, and the Old English words for the numbers 70 through 120, that's the second half of the great or the long hundred, used that hund prefix in the same pattern. Hundseofontig, hundeatig, hundenleofantig, hundtwelftig. Now, the hund was a prefix that could be dropped, and by dropping it, you'd get seofontig, 70, eatig, 80, right up to 11 and 12. And now we go back to Ring of Words for more on why this all happened. The answer lies in an ancient system of counting in 12s. Much later, at the end of the Middle English period, certain commodities such as fish were counted in hundreds that actually contained 6 score, or 120, and this was known as the Great Hundred or Long Hundred. That this probably goes back to ancient times is shown by the fact that in Old Norse 100 was 2 tigir, 10 tens. 110 was elifut tigir, 11 tens. And, as I mentioned earlier, 120 was hundrað, 100. Now, frankly, that all makes more sense to me, and I vote that we go back to using 11 and 12. Who's with me? Folks, that's it for today's Word Nerd Wednesday. Come back next week as we wander the wide, wild, wonderful world of words weekly on Wednesdays. And if there's a word you want to know more about, please let me know by emailing bartleman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free RSS feed, a monthly hangout with me, bonus weekly episode, and more. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Third Age Thursday. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and follow at Tolkien Times on all your social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.